Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor YouTube Live. My name is Brandon Drumm. I'm here with Parker Thune. Our man Spencer Forsythe is behind on the keys, working all the technology, making sure we're doing it all right. And hey, guess what, folks? It's football time in Oklahoma. Yeah, I did
That's
that on
the second time
too.
you've gotten to do that today.
I've done it and I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Yeah, it is the second time I've gotten to do it today, and I'm pretty hyped about it. Yeah, it is football time in Oklahoma, and it is well worth it that you guys are going to hang out with us for a little bit. We're going to talk a little Oklahoma UTEP. We're going to talk about some depth chart reactions, and we're going to talk about, well, Parker and I dropped our balls today. So
we did indeed.
we're going to talk about our ball dropping, if you know what I mean. We're going to get into all of that on this YouTube live, and you guys are going to enjoy it. We're going to answer your questions as well, and we're going to have some fun, guys. I think it's going to be an exciting time to be on this YouTube live. So Parker, man, how are you doing, man? I know we did a podcast earlier this morning. It's up. I'm going to have the links and everything up on OU Insider and out on YouTube, out on the Twitter space and the Facebook space and the Instagram space later on today or tonight. And obviously I'm going to have the offensive depth chart sourced VIP notes dropping late tonight that you guys are going to love. And then Friday, you're going to get the defensive version of it. We got a lot of notes coming for you guys. Oh, and I have some pretty cool OU SEC information coming on. The VIP stuff coming later on too. Little nuggets there, man. Little nuggets. All right, Parker, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. I wouldn't go as far as to use the infamous double entendre that Brent Venables used at Big 12 Media Day, but game week does have us all drinking from a fire hose. So obviously we're going to be hitting don't even go there. Don't even go there. But it's already been a full week of coverage. I'm going to be going to Norman High versus Norman North tomorrow, Thursday, to check out OU running back commit Chapman McCown in action.
Nice.
And then the plan for Friday, and I realize this is probably not the smartest thing I've ever done, but I'm going to plow through and make it happen. I'm going to be round tripping to Lee's Summit North High School in Kansas City in the span of a single night to watch OU commit Caden Green, four-star offensive lineman in the class of 2023, as well as 2024 defensive line target Williams Nwaneri and 2025 wide receiver target Isaiah Mosey. So as of right now, the way I have it all mapped out, I'm going to be back in Norman at about 3 a.m. Saturday, sleep for about 4 hours, and then we're going to hit the ground running and get pregame coverage rolling.
Yeah. That you sound super busy, man. God bless you on that trip. I'm going down to see Colton Vasek versus Anthony Evans on Friday. Thursday, I will be watching my kids' games. Got to do the dad stuff. But Friday morning, I'm going down to see Colton Vasek versus Anthony Evans at Converse Judson. Down there by San Antonio. And then Saturday morning, I'm driving back early, going to be back in Norman about 12:30, 2 hours before kickoff, maybe an hour and a half, maybe 1 o'clock. But I think I'll be on with Parker a little bit during the pregame show. So it'll be fun. We'll do some more talking of the OU UTEP game as well. So Parker, let's get right into it. Let's talk about the depth chart and kind of the things that we've talked about on the podcast, but also just kind of what stood out during the pressers. But we'll talk about first the depth chart, what stood out to us most. For me, obviously, our Mason Thomas ahead of, or right, the or not ahead, but the or with Marcus Stripling after everything we heard about Marcus Stripling for ever. About everything that he's done and all the things that he's accomplished over this winter and spring, and just turned all the heads in the fall camp and everything. Miguel Chavis just beating the drum of, hey, this guy has matured. He's gonna make plays for us. He's gonna be this. He's gonna be that. And then you see this freshman coming in and being the or with him. I thought that was probably the most significant thing for me on the two deep. Um, I don't think anything else was really that shocking. I think if you were on OU Insider VIP, really there wasn't a lot of shocking things. I think there's going to be people that are shocked about Jaden Davis starting. We reported that 3 weeks ago, it feels like. And I think, and it's not shocking, but Grayson Haltom and Kelvin Gilliam kind of being the backups to Jalen Redmond and Jordan Kelly, expected from us, maybe not so expected from the fan base, if you will. So I think there's a lot of those things that stood out. I think Jake McCoy, Mr. Edmond, as you talked about in the podcast, is another guy that, we talked about him getting some run with the twos because of obviously TD Roof's injury with his it was shoulder, right? So was it
Bicep.
shoulder or was it bicep? That's right.
Bicep, torn
Tore his
bicep.
bicep. Yep. Yeah. So I mean, all of those things, I guess some fans would call it shocking if they're not on the OU Insider VIP. But for us, it was like, oh yeah, that's cool. But our Mason Thomas, yeah, that's still shocking. No matter how good he did, to be the or with Marcus Stripling is shocking.
Yeah, well, I will add this. It's not, and as you mentioned, Brandon, anyone that had been up to speed with the team notes we've been dropping at ouinsider.com kind of knew that was in the works. But even so, it was surprising to see him listed as an or with Stripling, just because Stripling's a rising senior. Our Mason Thomas is a true freshman who hasn't even been on campus for 3 months now. That said, throughout fall camp, we continue to hear, and I remember one conversation in particular, talking to somebody very close to the program, that said, and we heard such glowing things about the offensive line as a whole and how offensive line may be a legitimate strength for the Sooners in 2022. And talking to this particular individual, the thing that they said that really, really stood out to me was that offensive line looks outstanding unless they're trying to block 32. They can't touch him. And if you watched our Mason Thomas's high school film, you saw it, right? You understood why the Sooner staff, as soon as they took office at Oklahoma, were very quick to turn around and make an effort to flip him from Iowa State, excuse me. But for it to come together this quickly, and for him at 6'2", 222 pounds, which is slight for the position, even slighter than Nick Benito. Nick Benito was playing 232 last year, and everybody thought he was undersized. So for him to be where he's at on the depth chart right now, and for him to have performed the way that he has in fall camp, that is truly a statement. And he's going to have opportunities over the course of non-conference play to prove he belongs. If he does prove he belongs, this is a guy that's going to steal situational snaps from the likes of Marcus Stripling and Reggie Grimes and Jonah Laulu down the line. And I still expect that Stripling is going to get a lot of run. You look at your starting defensive ends right now, and you have Reggie Grimes, you have Ethan Downs, two big bodies, two guys that are going to be essential in run support. And Downs in particular has a phenomenal ability to get after the quarterback as a pass rusher. But if you're looking for more of a true rush guy on any given down, that's probably going to be Marcus Stripling until or unless our Mason Thomas slides in and proves he's that guy more so than Stripling is. So I think Marcus Stripling isn't really a guy that I anticipated heading into the season was going to have a little bit of heat underneath him. But that's what it seems like is going on right now with our Mason Thomas. He's going to be pressing Marcus Stripling for snaps at that true rush position off the edge.
Yeah, no, he is, and he's going to be making some plays. I think all four of those guys are going to make plays. If you're talking Ethan Downs, Marcus Stripling, Reggie Grimes, I guess all five essentially are Mason Thomas and Jonah Laulu. I think they're all going to be making plays for Oklahoma at some point during not just the UTEP game, but all season, as long as God rest their souls, they stay healthy. So, I mean, I think that's one position that if you're an Oklahoma fan, you feel really strongly about that defensive end spot and that edge rush spot. And the fact that Clayton Smith isn't one of those guys shows you the depth, because there were people that thought he had a much improved fall camp, but it wasn't improved enough obviously to jump those 5 guys. So from this point on, I think I don't know. You don't want to get into speculation of what might happen later on, but it just is interesting, especially with how well Oklahoma is also recruiting at that position, with a 5-star coming in, and obviously one of the top 100 players in the country potentially in Colton Vasek. So there is a lot of things that could happen at that position. Majority of them good. So if you're Oklahoma, you feel good. You should feel good about the front 4. I think linebacker depth and safety depth is where, if you're an Oklahoma fan, you've got to sit there and go, please nobody get hurt, because at that point things can start to go downhill pretty quickly. And I'm not talking about too deep. Too deep, they should be okay at several positions, particularly safety. It's when you get past that, a lot of inexperience, and particularly a linebacker, with the loss of TD Roof, and you got to walk on. I'm not saying Jake McCoy's not going to be a good player, but that's a question mark. That's a big question mark going into the game 1. Big one, in my opinion.
It is. And now that you have TD Roof down, you have, as we've mentioned before, 4 linebackers on this roster that have played a meaningful down as a Sooner. It's David Agwebu, Danny Stutzman, Deshaun White, Shane Witter. So you got 3 of those penciled in as starters right now. Witter is the one on the 2 deep that we've seen in meaningful action for Oklahoma. But Jake McCoy is going to have to step up. Jaron Kanik is going to have to step up. And you're going to have to hope that, like you said, Agwebu and Stutzman stay healthy and they stay on the field a lot. It's going to be a supreme test of conditioning for those 3 linebackers in particular, the ones that are penciled into starting roles, and Agwebu, Stutzman, and Deshaun White. But at safety, it's funny, Brandon, because there are a lot of bodies back there, but I think it's become increasingly clear that there probably aren't a whole lot of guys beyond the starters that you have a ton of faith in at the moment. Now, I'm really, really high on Robert Spears Jennings. And depending on how he's able to break out and strut his stuff in 2022, I think he'll be in the conversation to start going forward, sophomore year and beyond. But right now, you obviously have Key Lawrence listed as an or starter alongside Justin Broyles. There were folks that were surprised by that, but again, that's a testament to everything Broyles has done, his body of work, how much he is respected, how much of a leader he has become in that defensive backfield. And then we haven't heard a bad word about Billy Bowman since the day that spring ball started. I mean, it was not difficult to see that he was going to be one of the Sooner starters at safety very, very early on in the process. But what are you going to get from Damon Harmon? What are you going to get from Jordan Mukes? What of Bryson Washington? So there are a lot of bodies back there right now, but I don't know that the trust in that depth is probably where Brandon Hall would like it to be right now.
It's not. Like, I think that's pretty evident. It's not like you can't look at that and go, oh yeah, it's great. When you got Key Lawrence a little dinged up and you're having to move Justin Harrington over there from the cheetah position, like there's obviously not the depth that you want, because you would think that maybe a Jordan Mukes would come in, or somebody of that ilk could come in and at least fill in and take up some space for a little bit, but they don't think he's there yet. They feel like Jordan Mukes is 1 year away, and they feel like he's going to be great in a year, but they're not ready for him to be out there on a down end. That's just my opinion, like obviously, but that's kind of the feeling that you get just from the depth chart and the things that we've heard over this fall camp. So look, I think the other interesting thing obviously has got to be the return game. I think you and I both agree that Mims and probably LV Shelton, Bunkley are probably going to be the punt guys. They have Eric Gray listed there. Do you really want to risk your starting running back punt returning? Like,
No, and also there are going to be a lot of people that watch Eric Gray field a punt and immediately get PTSD to Stillwater last year.
that's fair. I mean, that did cost them the game, but kick return, Marcus Major, Billy Bowman, and I think Jalil Farouk are the three. If you were going to pick who the two would be, I would go Farouk and Major. Would that be your guess?
Well, here's the thing. It's kind of a paradox, right? Because I don't think anyone would argue that Billy Bowman is the most dynamic returner on your roster, but he's also your starting free safety. So do you want to risk him getting banged up on a kick return if it costs you your starting free safety? And so that's the internal battle that you have to fight if you want to throw Billy Bowman out there. Then again, Jalil Farouk is one of your starting wide receivers, right? So you almost run the same risk with him. But that said, you have a lot more depth in the receiver room right now than you do with your safeties. So as much as I would like to see Billy Bowman handle the bulk of the kick return action, I agree with you. It's probably going to be more Jalil Farouk and more Marcus Major. And it may honestly be a couple other guys that aren't listed on the depth chart at that position. Maybe LV Bunkley Shelton gets a look. We saw Bentavious Thompson returning kicks in practice.
Gavin Sawchuk
with the speed he has, he can be a weapon in the return game. So I don't necessarily think that that's something Oklahoma needs to have sorted out in week one. I think if you're confident that you can roll Billy Bowman out there and not risk him getting injured, or rather that's a risk you're willing to take, then I think he's the obvious answer. But if not, you have a multiplicity of guys that you could turn to as the fallback option.
So an interesting thing about Gavin Sawchuk that people don't really know is, so as a freshman, he didn't start. He was playing more corner and wide receiver for Valor, and how he became the starting running back and them getting the ball in his hands a lot more was they were playing a game. It may have been 2 or 3 games into the season, and he had 3 kick returns for touchdowns. And at that point, that is when the Valor coaches are like, oh, well, we probably should get him the ball. And the rest is history. But it's kind of weird, like if history repeats itself, like he goes in there, somebody, heaven forbid that happens, but somebody gets dinged up and they're like, Gavin Sawchuk, you're in. Well, and he goes in and returns it. That's got to give them confidence to say, let's give him a try at running back now and see if he can break one of those out as well. So you never know how that's going to play out, but I just thought that was an interesting story that his dad told me one time, is that's how his I guess his game transformed into what it is, because most people thought he was a corner more so than a running back early in his career. So anyways, let's talk about just what stood out to you, obviously, during the pressers this week. Brent Venables, Jeff Levy, Ted Roof, and then, we got to talk to an assortment of players, Ethan Downs, Justin Harrington, trying to think of
David
everybody.
Agwebu, who is not
David
Justin
Agwebu.
Harrington.
No, why'd you do that, dude? And there's a story behind that, folks, but I'm not going to get into that. And it has nothing to do with me, I promise, or Parker. Somebody else confused Justin Harrington, or confused David Agwebu with Justin Harrington, and literally asked a question. Said, I'm David, not Justin. Anyways, so what stood out outside of that happening during the player interviews? What stood out to you most?
Man, I think what stood out most was in the availability session with Woody Washington. I don't think he was intentionally trying to throw shade. I think he was just being matter of fact, because that's the type of person Woody is. But he was asked a question about Jay Valai. And I'm paraphrasing here, but what he essentially said was, it's really, really nice to be coached by somebody that understands the nuance of the position. That's something that we haven't really had over the last few years, which, to be fair, the Sooners haven't, because Roy Manning was and is a linebackers coach by trade. So I just thought that was kind of a funny moment where Woody was like, yeah, it's really nice to be coached by somebody that actually played cornerback. That's, and then I think hearing Chris Murray talk about the offensive line yesterday just continues to inspire confidence that Bill Bedenbaugh's group is well conditioned in particular, which is going to be so pivotal because of how quickly Jeff Lebby's offense runs. So we know the Sooners are deep. We've heard it stated and restated by sources that we've talked to, Brandon, that the Sooners have at least 8 to 10 guys that they feel confident in along the offensive line. And it looks like they're going to have to pull some guys from that second team this Saturday at the right tackle position. If what we have heard holds true by the time game day rolls around. But I think that's going to be the most important aspect of the offensive line and their play as a whole in 2022 is how they're able to keep up with the tempo and whether they're able to maintain their level of play operating within an offense that moves as quickly as Lebby's does. Because when we saw it in the spring game, right, there's not a whole lot of time in between plays. So the Sooners are going to be running a lot of plays in a very limited amount of time as they move down the field. And that's grueling. It's a grind for everybody, but especially on those offensive linemen who are carrying 310, 320, even 330 pounds, right? So Chris Murray was asked about that in particular. And as you'd expect that he would, he referenced Jerry Schmidt and the workout regimen and how they've been prepared to run with the tempo that Lebby operates with. And so that's more than anything what I'm going to be most curious about and see how that manifests itself on the field against UTEP and Kent State, because these first two games are tune-ups. Everybody kind of has that understanding. But seeing how the offensive line maintains the tempo and is able to continue progressing down the field and getting lined up in a hurry and turning around and running the next play in a hurry. I'm gonna want to see that before I get too confident in the offensive line, even though, admittedly, the things we've heard about this offensive line coming out of fall camp have been highly complimentary.
I guess my mic's been off. I don't even know why, but guess what? I was saying that, hey, yeah, look, regardless of what we heard this week, and as you said, from everybody thinks the offensive line's can be better. And I think it is. I think something that's very not talked about enough is how slow developing the plays were under Riley, and how more power, more of a cutback zone type thing that they're doing now under Lebby. And it's not more counters, it's not delays and stuff like that. That was more Riley's MO. And sometimes that kind of, I think, loses your aggressiveness over time if you haven't already had that built in through a strength and conditioning regimen. So you can't just ask the offensive line coach, like if your O-line's out there running sprints with your skill guys, you can't ask them to be an offensive line coach to be, oh, now we got to get tough and rugged in short yardage situation. They haven't trained for that. That's not what they worked on during their time. Everything's muscle memory. Like that's how that stuff works. So I think strength conditioning coach, big key. And I think the toughness, not only that Jerry Schmidt brought, but that Brent Venables brings to go along with Bill Bedenbaugh, and the toughness and grit that he demands all encompassed together is going to make that offensive line a lot better as far as run blocking and in turn pass blocking, because it's going to be the defense is going to be on their heels more often than not, because you don't know what they're going to do in Levy's offense, where I thought at times it was very easy to decipher what Riley's was going to call in certain situations. Like we could sit there and say, oh, they're going to do this, and they did. Now they may have completed it because they were more talented than everybody else, but there was some very, very obvious things that happened last year and the year before where we were like, dude, can they not be more creative? Like this just seemed very un-Lincoln Riley like, and it just got worse and worse as the season went on last year. We didn't know he had one foot out the door until later, but that's really what it's kind of boiled down to. And I think that in turn lost some of the toughness. And I'm interested to see just how tough this team's going to be because of everything we've heard about the toughness. So I think that is, and I think how much does Justin Harrington play over Deshaun White at times? We know it's going to happen more. If they're in the spread, they're going to have Justin Harrington out there. But do they get to a point where they're like, okay, we feel better about him moving to Deshaun White, moving back to the inside a little bit more? He's going to play the cheetah, but supplying some depth at that interior backer spot that maybe there's not a lot of right now.
By the way, if you want to hear from the players and you want to hear from Brent Venables, we have all those availability sessions as well as BV's press conference up on the OU Insider YouTube channel. So once we're off here, go ahead and peruse as you will. I think we heard from 8 total players, 8 to 10. I can't remember the exact number, but we heard from quite a few on Monday and Tuesday. All those interview sessions up on the channel right now. Let's get to a couple of questions here. One fan wants to know, what are your thoughts on the interior defensive line? And we've talked about this a lot the last couple of days. I think there were a lot of folks that were surprised to see Jordan Kelly listed as a co-starter alongside Jalen Redmond. But I also think a lot of those folks don't realize that Jalen Redmond had been banged up throughout the month of August. And that certainly played into the depth chart, specifically at defensive tackle, that you see heading into this game week against UTEP. That's why you see Jordan Kelly and Jalen Redmond listed as co-starters. I expect, and Brandon, I think I can speak for you in saying this as well, I fully expect that Jalen Redmond is going to be the sole starter at that position relatively quickly. It's just a matter of having somebody else lined up just in case Redmond isn't at 100% heading into this campaign. Now, that's not to take anything away from Jordan Kelly, because he's had a fantastic offseason, and he's a guy that we were hearing rave reviews on
Mr. Consistent
as early as February or March. But when healthy, when 100%, I don't think there's any doubt that Jalen Redmond is the most impactful interior defensive lineman that Oklahoma has on this roster.
Yeah, well, Venables kind of made note of that whenever I asked about the depth at the offensive line, defensive line, and he brought up all the names, but when he brought up Jalen Redmond, he said, obviously, Jalen Redmond is somebody we think has a lot of talent, and everybody else does too, because of the production he's had when he's been healthy, and we expect that. So he has a high expectation for him. Like, he thinks he's going to be somebody, and when you talk to people, not just Brent Venables, you talk to people behind the scenes, they're like, yeah, that guy's going to be special. If he can stay healthy, he can be that dude. Remember, he had 6.5 sacks during his 2019 season, where he only played I think it was 3/4 of the season, if that, and then set out 2020 before, coming back in 2021, didn't have the year that he thought. It was banged up a little more lower body wise in 2021. So if he can stay healthy, that is the key thing. Healthy when it comes to Jalen Redmond, sky's the limit for him, because remember, everybody thought that there were some publications out there heading into the 2020 season before all of the COVID stuff had him as a first round pick going into the 2021 draft. So, I mean, he's got all the ability in the world. He just has to stay with it.
Yeah. And Lest we forget, the last time Jalen Redmond was fully healthy for an entire season, he led the Sooners in sacks as a defensive tackle, which is not
Yeah.
an easy thing to do. And that was 3 years ago. So if he is fully healthy heading into 2022, and depending on how quickly he can get back to 100%, this is a guy that should be a force on the interior for Oklahoma. Let's hit one more here before we transition to recruiting talk. Another viewer wants to know our thoughts on the wide receiver room. And it was kind of to be expected that Jalil Farouk, Theo Weiss, and Marvin Mims were going to be the 3 starters. You'll see a lot of Drake Stoops as well, naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But for those that were keeping up with the information we've been dropping on alluinsider.com VIP, 2 of the youngsters that we were name dropping the most as guys to watch and guys that could crack the 2 deep and supplant some older guys in that room were Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson. Lo and behold, they're both on the 2 deep. And you're talking about 2 guys with very similar skill sets. Anderson 6'4", Jaden Gibson at 6'5". They both move incredibly well and are very fluid, especially for their size. And they both got crazy ball skills, which have helped them ascend this depth chart to the point where they're on the 2 deep before they've ever played a game at the University of Oklahoma. And I think Gibson has demonstrated that he's that dude to the extent that he's going to get snaps, and he's going to get quite a few snaps in 2022. Anderson, I think, has a bit more to prove in the early stage of the season just because he was laid up for most of spring ball with that wrist injury. So he hasn't had the opportunity to prove himself as much as Gibson has. But these are 2 guys that have limitless potential. And I will be curious to see how early we see that potential start to manifest itself as we look ahead to the 2022 season.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson. The other guy that I think Jalil Farouk, and I keep hearing over and over and over, like he's going to be that dude this year. Everybody expects him to have a massive year. I've also been told by numerous people, and I know Drake Stoops isn't starting, but he seems to be that guy that if you need a clutch catch on a 3rd down, I've talked to probably 4 or 5 people that are around this thing on a day-to-day basis, and they say it's almost like a given, like he's going to get the ball on 3rd and 9 or 3rd and 8 or on the goal line and they need a touchdown, and he makes the play no matter what happens. They said he can get crushed by 2 dudes and he comes up holding the ball. Like it's just, they say his toughness, his grit, and they say he's just a baller. He's just a gamer. He's a football player. And I expect that to be, I think he's going to get a lot more notoriety this year than he has in previous years, because I think he's going to be relied on more heavily than he has been in previous years. No, he's not starting over Marvin Mims. And yes, we all expect Marvin Mims to have another massive season, but you can't ever underestimate Drake Stoops and what he brings to the table, because he just has the flair to make the big play when he's playing. I'm not talking like the home run ball. I'm talking need 20 yards to turn the field, flip the field. He'll do that for you if you need it. Like in just that most opportune moment. And so for me, I think the wide receiver room is deep. It's talented. And like you said, with Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson, they're going to be tough just because of how their length and ability. And Jaden Gibson, he's a unicorn. He can flat fly. I know Nick Anderson can too, but we've just heard more buzz with Jaden Gibson and the things that he's done during the fall camp than Nick Anderson. Both have had remarkable fall camps, but one's flashed a little bit more than the other. And we're talking about Jaden Gibson there.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'll add this as we make the transition to recruiting. I said it on the radio last week. I'll double down. I'm willing to bet Jalil Farouk is your leading receiver in 2022. That's not to take anything away from Marvin Mims, because I think he's going to have a fantastic year as well. But I think the fact that most opposing defensive coordinators are going to be keying on Mims and attempting to shut him down is going to leave a ton of opportunities for 2 guys in particular, Jalil Farouk and Braden Willis. Count me in. I am very much on the Braden Willis bandwagon heading into
buying all Braden Willis stock heading into the season, huh?
Yep. Yes, sir.
He leading that
I expect
bandwagon. Okay. Okay.
I expect a big year from him.
There's been multiple comments from what I see for us to say hello to Sir Ricardo LeBlanc as normal. We got to give that shout out. That's been
What's
kind
up,
of a
Ricardo?
ritual for the last 9 months or so. So here it is again. Yeah, everybody like some dude just said it. I've just got here. Had they already given the shout out to Ricardo LeBlanc? No, we hadn't yet. So
Appointment
right, there it
viewing.
is. Yep, there you go. Hey,
Okay, so where do we? I guess we start
Yeah.
DJ Hicks, huh?
Yeah, balls were dropped today, and I know that the other places dropped their balls before us, but I have to tell you, like, regardless of what I've heard and the momentum that I've known Oklahoma's been on for a while now, and I've been preaching, and I kept saying, I said this back in June that Oklahoma was gaining on everybody. And after the party in the palace, it seemed like Oklahoma surpassed everybody. But I never really wanted to, because of who he is and just the stir that it causes and it caused a stir whenever I put in my crystal ball for him. So, yeah, yesterday I wrote a note on OU Insider VIP and I said, look, like we reported it last week that he was going to take his official for Bedlam. Now it's out there. Everybody else is starting to report it. And when you talk to people about David Hicks and his upcoming visits, there's a lot of that's the plan talk. You keep getting that's the plan. That's the plan. And when I talked to David, he said the only thing I have definitively set up is OU and Bedlam. And come to find out, come to find out, even unofficially, he was supposed to go to A&M Miami. Well, that's his homecoming weekend, I believe. So there's that. And I have to double check on that, but that's what I've been told by a few people, homecoming weekend. So that may throw a wrench in visiting there. September 10th is a night game for Oklahoma against Kent State. Obviously, the more fun game for anybody would be Alabama, Texas, but I think we all feel like that's going to be a blowout. And does David Hicks go to that game? I don't know. Does he show up to Norman? I don't know. I think that's one that'll be very interesting because Jordan Arnaud's going to be there. Peyton Bowen's going to be there. Jackson Arnold's going to be there. A host of other big name recruits for Oklahoma is going to be at that Kent State Stripe the Stadium game. Does David Hicks make the trek up since it's a 6 p.m. kickoff for that game? I want to see where things kind of line up. I kind of expect him to go to Texas, Alabama if he has a chance, but I would not be shocked if he showed up in Norman. I just wouldn't.
I mean, I agree with you. And I think much like you said, this is the direction that things have been headed for months. The Sooners really began to pick up serious steam after Hicks visited for the party in the palace. And as of right now, it's pretty much a consensus across the industry, Brandon. The Sooners are in the catbird seat here. They just have to maintain. That's all they got to do at this point is maintain. And if they land DJ Hicks, if he does end up committing to Oklahoma, what a capstone this is to this recruiting class, regardless of who else they get down the stretch, right? Because we can talk till the cows come home about the chances that they close on Cecilia Kana or the law firm of Bowen and Yates or Marcus Deal, Malachi Coleman. I'm sure we'll talk about him here momentarily. But and then you throw in the other safety targets in Conrad Hussey and potentially Rohan Fluellen. But DJ Hicks, I have said it many a time. In terms of the high school players that I have gotten the chance to watch in person, there is nobody that holds a candle to DJ Hicks. There's a reason why he's the number one defensive lineman in this entire class. This is a transformational type of player. This is a guy that is one of your cornerstones as you attempt to reverse a trend and change a culture on the defensive side of the football in Norman, Oklahoma. And he's quite simply a talent on the defensive line, the likes of which Oklahoma has not had in over a decade. I would say going back to Gerald McCoy. That's how good DJ Hicks is. And so the fact that we're talking about the Sooners getting a guy like this in year one for Brent Venables and Todd Bates and the remainder of this staff, it speaks to the outstanding work that they've done and continue to do. And at this point, it's become really, really difficult to bet against them because it seems that they cannot miss. If you want to find the last guy that they were legitimately pushing for that did not commit to Oklahoma, you got to rewind all the way back to July 16th when Troy Bowles committed to Georgia. And that was a tough decision for Bowles down the stretch too.
Yeah.
BV and company made a push. So this Sooner staff can do no wrong as of late. It just gets more and more impressive by the week. And I don't know if with a singular player, it'll get more impressive than what they were able to pull off with Colton Vasek. But you look at the targets still on the board, man, this could be a special. It already is a special class for Oklahoma compared to the classes that Oklahoma has signed in previous years. But this could be a special class, period, if things continue to trend in this direction. We're not talking about the best class that Oklahoma has ever signed in the modern recruiting era. We're probably talking about the best class that any Big 12 team has ever signed, and one of the best classes top to bottom that has been signed ever in the modern recruiting era, and one of the most balanced classes at that. That's something we've talked about quite a bit, but warrants another mention is the fact that there is so much balance across the board. You do not see a dense concentration of talent at one position and then a couple of 3 stars at another position. Right? You have blue chip talent all across the board. And if you close on DJ Hicks and you can manage to flip Peyton Bowen and you can pull off the heat check and reel in Malachi Coleman as well.
Or Samson Okunlola.
That is the heat check of all heat checks.
That's a heat check of all heat checks, man.
As I mentioned earlier today on the podcast, if they end up with Samson Okunlola, which I did not expect, by the way, but
no,
if they end up with that kid, might as well just crystal ball every single one of OU's top targets in the class of 2024, because at that point, BV and the staff are getting whoever they want. It makes me like, is this what it's like to cover Alabama, Brandon?
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. That's what I said. Yeah, that's what I said earlier. I was like, so this is what it's like whenever they just go out and get somebody and it's like, yeah, they're going to go to Oklahoma. Like there's no, you just have the confidence, right? Like if you're an Oklahoma fan, you're like, yeah, and we were talking about from a reporter's perspective. We have a lot of hesitation sometimes when we report things and we're like, man, I don't know, we hear things. Now it's like, putting that crystal ball in and you feel pretty good that it's going to work out in Oklahoma's favor and you're not going to have to flip it. Anthony Evans had us on our heels, flipped it to Georgia. And then I get a phone call at 1 p.m. and he's like, he's going to Oklahoma. And I said, wait, what? I just got a phone call. Said he was telling everybody he's going to Georgia. No, he just told Georgia he's going to Oklahoma. Had to make another phone call. It's like, it's true. He's going to Oklahoma. I talked to Anthony Evans earlier this week, and I'm going to see him. Obviously, I said that earlier. I'm going to see him in Vasek. And he said, dude, I didn't know until the last second. Like, I wanted to go to Oklahoma, but with it was how unstable the wide receiver room as far as the coaches went. Like, make sure LD Washington's still going to be in the room if they hired somebody over him, or LD Washington was going to be the coach. That was something they wanted made clear to them. And Oklahoma, Brent Venables, Jeff Levy, dude, they took the bull by the horns. And I mean, they rode that bad boy home to make sure that they got Anthony Evans. And that was one of the more aggressive 5-day spans I've ever seen a coach do. I guess publicly the coaches do to make that happen for Oklahoma in a long time. Because otherwise we've grown accustomed to seeing if it's trending a direction away from Oklahoma, that's usually where it ends up. Like it's just, this is a new brand of recruiting for Oklahoma that even as analysts and reporters, we're still getting used to. It's not normal for us because we're like, he's going to go over, it is what it is. we're even starting to think about Samsung Okunlola being the heat check of all heat checks, because what Oklahoma's doing makes it feel like it's possible, even when maybe it's probably not, and likely it's not.
Well, and look, obviously, as a native Nebraskan myself, I have a lot of connections up that way, and I've done quite a bit of reporting on Malachi Coleman ever since he got the Oklahoma offer back in April, I want to say. 2 months ago, like, I'll be honest, Brandon, 2 months ago, that felt like a pipe dream for Oklahoma.
Yep.
It really did. And at this point, like, sitting here on August 31st, I'd say I feel better about Malachi Coleman being a Sooner than I do about him being a Husker. That is how drastically things have shifted. And that right there is a microcosm of what this entire recruiting cycle has been for this coaching staff. It's been win after win after win that, quite simply, Oklahoma fans are not accustomed to. Whether it's because of position or prestige, whatever the case may be, these are the types of recruiting wins that Oklahoma fans are not used to seeing their program come away with. Right now, the Sooners have, what is it, 7, 8? I think it's 8 now. 8 top 100 prospects. The most they'd ever signed in a single class before this year was 5. 5. They've blown that out of the water. And guess what?
Yeah.
Look at the guys still on the board. Hicks would be 9. Coleman would be 10. Renaud, 11. Cecilia Connor,
Bowen,
12. Peyton Bowen, 13. And there's a very good chance that by the end of the year, Colton Vossick's a top 100 guy. Samuel Masigo's a top 100 guy.
And Caleb
So
Spencer's a top 24/7 guy, likely, potentially, after what, and we can talk about that here in a second too.
Yeah, and by that too, like, that's the other end of it, is not only are they getting the top 5 or the top flight talent, not only have they locked down guys like Jackson Arnold, PJ Atabare, Derek LeBlanc, Jacoby Johnson, Makari Vickers. Not only have they locked down those types of players, but the lower down guys, people are starting to realize, oh, shoot, they're really good football players. I mean, our Southeast recruiting analyst, Andrew Ivins, wrote an article over the weekend about Caleb Spencer being the next Isaiah Simmons. That's pretty high praise.
That's heady praise. Yeah. Oof. Yeah, but I thought, how about the story that he told too? I mean, that was just the funniest thing ever. And people don't know. So Andrew Ivins is talking to Cooper Patanga during their what was it?
Preps to pros.
Preps to pros. That's what it's called. Yep. So they're talking about it, and they're talking about how good Oklahoma's class is. And Cooper Patanga said, I like that class far more than he likes Texas right now, just because of what they've done as far as balance and who they brought in. And Andrew Ivins topped it off by saying, yeah, and when your second lowest guy is Caleb Spencer, who probably won't be that by the end of the season. And he says they're standing on the sideline as Caleb Spencer's team goes down to Southern Florida to play. I don't remember who they played, but they went down there to play a ball game, and he's already dominated and made several plays. And he turns after the other team scores a touchdown. He turns and he says, hey, get your cameras out. I'm going to go block this. And then he does it. He does it. And then points at them and said, I told you. So, I mean, there's just a level of play, a level of confidence, a level of, you can say,
get your popcorn ready is what we call that.
Athletic cockiness. I mean, who cares? That's the type of people that Brent Venables has been recruiting. And you can tell, because I can tell you, Derek LeBlanc is about as cocky and confident as it gets, but he plays up to that. Like, he backs it up. David Hicks is as cocky and confident as it gets. And he's the most introvert kid off the field. The biggest extrovert when that helmet comes on and those lights come on the stadium. The guy is flamboyant. He's demonstrative. Like, he is very just outgoing in everything that he does, to the point where he'll pull you over to the side to talk to you. He did it to me last Friday, told me he was going to tee one up, and then he did. and just lit the quarterback up. So, I mean, that's the type of guys they're recruiting. It's a different type of dude. And you know what? We haven't talked about like Caden McDonald. Like it's like there's other players out there, Marcus Steele, Caden McDonald, like all these different guys Oklahoma's in on. Like they could end up between what 25 and 29 potentially commits if they really got down into it. And I think if you got down to the transfers and stuff like that, maybe they'll pull in 33 to 35 total, but they're wanting to pull in more high school than transfer because Venables doesn't rely on transfers solely. But I think they could end up with 4 or 5 transfers every year. Don't you? Like, I think that's probably I think they'll max out at 5. I think if they can.
Yeah. It depends on need.
Yeah.
It's going to depend on which guys enter the NFL draft, which guys hit the transfer portal, because you will lose guys to the portal every year. And if Oklahoma is anything like Clemson while Venables was there, the losses to the portal will be pretty minimal, but there'll be at least a couple every year. And the Sooners already have 2 scholarships unaccounted for that they weren't anticipating losing because Brendan Walker retired from football. Joseph Wette stepped away from the team. So that, in addition to TD Roof with the torn bicep, of course, he was done after this season anyway. But come spring, you already got 2 more scholarships to fill that maybe you weren't already anticipating filling. And so you see why, and it's yet another reason why we've been saying for quite a while, Brandon, it's going to be a heavy class for Oklahoma. You're going to see 26, 27, 28, even 29, 30 guys in this recruiting class. The class could get as big as 30 because you think about it right now, 22 commits. You add Hicks, Renaud, Akana, Bowen, Yates, Coleman. Who am I forgetting? That's 28.
You have to add.
Anyway, you would
have to add. You want to add an interior guy like a nose tackle,
Marcus
like
Steele.
a Marquis Steele, Caden McDonald. Like if you found somebody you feel comfortable pushing for in that realm, maybe that would be 29, right? That get you to 29.
And
then you go to transfers.
Pull up from Curry range and you get Samson Okunlola. That's 30, but we're probably.
It's not happening, folks.
Yeah.
Don't get your hopes up. It's not happening. Or at least we don't think it's happening. I don't want to say it's not.
27 to 29 is probably the safe range to expect. And if you got holes you feel like you need to fill with experienced guys, go grab a couple from the transfer portal. And that's the new normal at the University of Oklahoma.
Yeah, look, it's a different time. The NIL, and everybody worried about the NIL with Oklahoma, and then you get the One Oklahoma merging with Learfield Sports, which was massive. You already have trying to think of all of them. You have Boom Squad, you have Norman NIL, and then you have what's the Dusty and Gabe's, what's it called?
Strengthening Oklahoma.
Strengthening Oklahoma. Like, isn't that 4 or 5? It's 4 or 5 NILs that they have that are pretty good NILs as far as money goes. And that's before they get their per diem and what they get on top of just being athletes at Oklahoma to go pay for their food, their housing, whatever, and they're spending money.
Let me interject here, Brandon, because this is what I want to emphasize, and I want to make sure people understand this. Just because Oklahoma isn't walking around and dropping massive bags does not mean Oklahoma doesn't have money.
No.
Those two things are not mutually inclusive in the slightest.
No, we reported. I reported last week, right? It was August 23rd. I reported that Oklahoma was about to by September 13th. They had to have all the architects' proposals in for $175 million upgrade on their facilities. $175 million upgrade. And we reported that last week. Gabe Eicher basically confirmed that today with his tweet. So there's money out there. They're dropping $40+ million on the softball, $30+ million on the baseball. Just a lot going on Oklahoma athletics, and the money is coming in. Oh, on top of that, it sounds like I don't think Oklahoma's going to be in the Big 12 next year. It doesn't look like it's
you don't say.
Way. Yeah. We've been trying to tell
So
everybody that
hold
for a
up.
while. Like, well,
Yeah,
they don't
yeah,
have the
hold
money
up.
to get out of
What you're
that.
telling me is OU and Texas aren't going to participate in a 14-team Big 12?
No, they're not going to be a rental so they can make $50 million on a TV contract for 2 years and then ditch out and then them lose half of their TV contract money because OU and Texas are gone. They did a thing on Forbes or whatever, I can't remember the magazine, where I think together Oklahoma and Texas combined what they're worth as far as television rights was more than the other 12 combined, counting Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF. Like you don't do that. You don't allow a conference to use you for two. And from what it sounds like everybody's trying to push Oklahoma out at this point. Anyways, I'm gonna have more on OU Insider tomorrow on this, but yeah, it's definitely interesting what's going on behind the scenes, or at least what I'm being told is going on behind the scenes right now. Very interesting stuff.
And look, this is something we've talked about for quite some time.
Yeah.
You had to understand that Joe Castiglione and everyone involved with the decision-making process here, they were throwing out 2025 and they were remaining adamant that 2025 was the target date because they had to. They didn't say that they weren't saying those things because they believed them. They were saying them because they had to.
Contractually had to say it publicly. Yep.
It did not take a Rhodes Scholar to come to the understanding that Oklahoma was not going to continue being the 500-pound gorilla for the Big 12's revenue stream for an additional 2 years, especially in a 14-team conference, instead of finding a way to make this SEC transition happen faster and enjoy the financial boon that comes as a byproduct.
Yeah. No, it's all happening. You have oil going really well for Oklahoma right now in the state of Oklahoma. You have the SEC combined with all that and combined with like the Paycoms and whatever else, the Loves and everybody else, all these big corporations that have gotten bigger and bigger and better. And then the corporations moving in because the growth of Oklahoma City Metro and it's a great combination when you add that, the growth of DFW, the growth of Houston. There's a lot of alumni base there, and it's just different. It's just different right now financially for Oklahoma than it has been in years past. And so people that say, "Oh, well, Oklahoma's a poor," they're idiots. They're idiots. I get so sick of hearing like University of Oklahoma's poor. No, they contractually have to do the things that they had to do. Like that's part of this game. If they came out and said, "No, we're leaving," Bowlesby, like I'll just get into this tomorrow. Like I got to get into it tomorrow a little bit. Like it's just different. Things are different now. So there's going to be a lot. I got a lot of sourced information coming on OU Insider tomorrow for the offensive side, the depth chart breakdown, thoughts, talk to a lot of people. It's going to be a really fun read for you guys. It's going to be long, but fun. Obviously, we'll have more notes on recruiting trail over the next few days. I got the VIP chat. Parker's got everything he's going. He's got a couple of games he's going to, so he's going to have notes from that. I'm going to go down to see Vasic and Anthony Evans. I'll have some notes from that. And then we'll have everything covered for you head to toe on Saturday for the Oklahoma ball game. And then the post-game podcast. And then follow it up with everything that we do. Rinse, wash, repeat, man. OU Insider is going to be loaded with fun content for you guys for the foreseeable future. And we can't wait for you guys to be able to see what we're about to bring to you all on a weekly basis. Going to be very, very fun.
More YouTube content coming tomorrow.
Yep.
So stay tuned for that. Also, all of y'all go watch JP and Trav right now. That's it for me.
Yep. All right. Well, before y'all go, thank y'all so much for watching. We had a lot of people on here today. 75% off right now. OU Insider, 75% off until Tuesday, I believe. You guys got to get a hold of that, man. $26 get you OU Insider plus all of 24/7 Sports. And if you wait a whole year and you pay the full price, you get a $230 value because we will, after the first year you're with us, we add Paramount Plus for free to y'all. So you'll get OU Insider plus Paramount Plus after 1 year. You got to stay for a year. That's the deal, but it's worth it. You get all OU Insider. You get 24/7. You want to go see Bama? You want to go see what they think of Jordan Renaud? Go for it. You can go click on this site. You want to go see what Texas A&M thinks of David Hicks? Go for it. You want to go see what Muleshoe's doing over there at USC and Malachi Nelson? Are they shaking in their boots? We don't know, but you can go find out if you want to yourself. I mean, all of that. You can see everything if you pay $26 right now, or if you don't want to do that, $1 for the first month, $9.95 afterwards. But literally the $24, 26 bucks going to say.
Yeah, look, why pay $1? Yeah, why pay $1 for the first month when you can pay $2 a month for an entire year? That's what it is.
It's $26 up front, but yeah, averages out.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. $2 per month. That is the price of a cup of coffee every month, and you get a year of the best and the most information on Oklahoma and football recruiting, Oklahoma football and recruiting that you will find across the entirety of the interwebs.
For real, Steve Wiltfong, Brandon Huffman, Greg Biggins, Andrew Ivins, Blair Angelo, Alan True, Brian Doan. Like, these are all of our national guys, Gabe Brooks, that bring information to you daily on OU Insider from OU recruits in their region, and they help us out significantly. We get to talk to them daily. We bring information from behind the scenes. Like, it's fun. We've grown so much. I think we've had, was in the last 4 months, 1,700, 1,800 members added, and we continue to grow. I think we've had almost 400 this month already. So, man, it has been a blast, and we are blessed because we get to cover Oklahoma football for you, OU fans. Like, we sincerely love our jobs and feel blessed to do it. So thank you so much. So on top of that, you guys have broken record after record with page views because it's you all. We do the job for you all. If you all weren't here, we wouldn't be doing the job. So thank you all so much. And thank you all for being on this YouTube live with us. That's going to do it for us on this latest episode of the OU Insider Under the Visors YouTube live. For Spencer Forsythe, for Parker Thune, my name is Brandon Drumm. You guys have a blessed night. Stay blessed.